Well, we've cut across, of course, to live visuals that we are getting of the Prime Minister returning from his visit to Europe. He was first in Italy, where he was attending the G20 summit on the invitation of Mario Draghi, the Prime Minister of Italy. And thereafter, of course, he headed for COP26, which was being held in Glasgow. And it is there at COP26 that he made those huge announcements. One of them, of course, is that India will achieve carbon neutrality by 2070. It is a target that he's set for this country. There was, of course, immense pressure on India as well as other developing countries to essentially put a date to that target. And that's been done at COP26. But there are other big issues that the Prime Minister has spoken about. At the G20, of course, there was the whole issue of how do developing countries like ours come out of what has been the adverse effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the economics of it all was discussed at the G20 summit. Of course, G20 is largely an economic bloc which looks at how nations deal with their economy. So in that sense, the Prime Minister had his agenda set, and he did speak to various other leaders in various bilateral meetings that were held. And on top of the agenda, of course, was the fact that how does the world as well as India recover from the G20 summit. Now, apart from that, the big focus, of course, was on COP26. Now, COP26 is where the world was meeting after the Paris Agreement was signed to come out with an announcement as well as to come out with a firm commitment to reduce global warming and to keep it to about 2 degrees centigrade. Now, 2 degrees centigrade is what has been agreed upon. However, there is perhaps an ambition to achieve about 1.5 degrees centigrade. So all of that has been talked about at COP26. The Prime Minister's address at COP26 was, of course, extremely eagerly awaited because China as well as Russia did not attend this summit. And that is what lent so much weight to what India has done, because despite being a developing country, our Prime Minister went there and made those commitments. The big one, of course, was achieving carbon neutrality by 2070, and that is something that India has promised it will achieve. Apart from that, of course, there has been focus on reducing emissions from India, and we have set some ambitious targets for 2030 as well. So those two are the key takeaways that we are getting. Of course, India's focus also has been on using renewable energy sources to, in a sense, meet our energy needs. And that is something that we've seen the country move towards for quite some time now. That has been the focus of Prime Minister Modi's vision also since he's been in power. So that obviously does help India in more ways than one to achieve the target of carbon neutrality by 2070. Now, there are, of course, other countries like the United States of America, which has promised to use carbon neutrality, to reach carbon neutrality by about 2050. China has committed to it by 2060. But there was a huge amount of disappointment, including Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who spoke about the fact that he was extremely disappointed that China and Russia decided not to turn up for this summit, because this summit, in a sense, was being seen perhaps as the meeting of global leaders where sufficient push was being given to climate change. So in that sense, there was a lot of disappointment from not just, the United States of America and Britain, which was, of course, hosting the COP20, but from other world countries as well. Now, just to tell our viewers that the COP26 was where the Paris Agreement was being taken forward. And obviously, there were a lot of commitments that countries were looking to be made. Now, of course, the Prime Minister, in that sense, leading India, he also, in his speech at COP26, which was watched very, very closely, spoke about a range of climate issues. The Prime Minister's focus also in the past has been on sustainable living, and that is something that the Prime Minister has spoken about in the past. And at his address at COP26 also, he continued to talk about sustainability and green goals, which India has set for itself. So in that sense, this summit perhaps, and the Prime Minister's leadership perhaps was about how India can achieve all those sustainable energy as well as green energy targets as we move forward, despite having to build this country In a sense, we are still a developing country, so obviously our carbon emissions are rather low as compared to the developed world. I'm going to try and bring out those figures for you as to where we stand in terms of carbon emissions, but we are at about 1.8 tons per person as compared to the US, I think, which stands at about 8.4 tons per person. So that is a huge gap. And then, of course, there is the European Union, which also has a large number, has a rather big footprint of carbon. So in that sense, it is that much more harder for developing countries like ours to meet those goals.